Chapter 4 The Wolf Den. The lame mate of Old Gray left the sheep basin by way of a cleft in the rocks. Soon she was circling a dwarf spruce and mountain pine thickets at timberline, and then entering the high timber itself along the base of the mountain ridge. Here she slowed down to a trot and even stopped occasionally to catch her breath and to look back for sign of her mate or of her pursuers. The paths of the moose led downstream. They made travel much easier, so the wolf followed their winding course, sometimes through snow, sometimes in steaming, sun-baked glades. Always high-strung, she felt particularly nervous and worried now. Every time her foot touched soft ground, she flinched or leaped to escape a possible trap in the trail. Narrow places she avoided for fear of snares. Her nose was testing every breath of air for man scent. When at length the paths led down to the lower valley of the Sulphur, she made a right-angled turn and began to ascend. Here she was 2 ridges removed from the sheep basin and more than 3 miles to the north. Another mile brought her to the edge of the wide glade, reaching from river straight up to timberline in the ridge above. There was no snow here, for it faced southeast and caught all the hot sun. A snapping twig caught her attention. The noise was caused by a young buck stepping about carelessly among the spruce trees as he searched for a safe daybed. This was a good sign that enemies were not near. The wolf circled him with caution, gave a resting doe an even wider berth, and after a long stand to listen and test the breeze, slipped cautiously around several boulders and plunged into the mouth of a cave. So well arranged was the position of this den that it could not be seen from any angle except almost straight above, nor could the she-wolf be seen as she moved from the density of the spruce timber into the boulder slide. A whimpering greeted her. 6 fat little pups, well furred but with eyes unopened, crawled about in a depression in the end of a 10-foot winding passage. The wolf licked their backs as they reached up blindly toward her body. Then she settled herself comfortably in the depression and gave the hungry young ones the chance they wanted to clamber over her until they found milk. They were so eager and serious about getting a meal that none made any sound except an occasional smack when he sucked too hard. The mother continued to lick them. Presently the one in the center, black as coal, shifted to steal his brother's place. The brother shoved against him. The pirate one growled lustily and soon won his way. The other groped about, whimpering until the old wolf stifled his grumblings with her active tongue. This was the den that old Jim expected to find in a few days' searching. If he had not been born with the patience of Job, he would have stopped hunting after the first 3 weeks and tried something more remunerative. But Jim was a determined plotter. He felt sure there was a den. Otherwise, the lone wolf would have left this country. He argued to himself that each day, by process of elimination, he was checking up on more territory and getting just that much nearer to success. Besides that, he liked the job. He never succeeded in seeing the she-wolf during that time, but he saw her tracks and he secured a first-hand knowledge of all the big game animals in the district. Johnny had gone to town and come back with fresh supplies. Again, he was at the ranger's cabin on the Sulphur. Jim was due to leave the trail for a rest, but doggedly he stayed on. He had a theory now. It was that the she-wolf would make mistakes of some kind and give him his chance just as soon as the pups grew as large that they would eat more meat than one parent could successfully bring to them regularly. The many caribou and deer, after a few raids, moved away to safer territory. They were already hunting for good country in which to have their fawns. The goats and sheep had become exceedingly wary and rarely left their safe precipices. The moose were too powerful for her to handle unaided, but she killed porcupines, the stupid sniveling creatures that knew only enough to raise the quills on their back and slap their barbed tails about when she came upon them. Even the grizzly avoided a porcupine, but the she-wolf, gaunt and more nervous than ever, killed one after another by seizing them on the bare nose and dragging them around until they grew exhausted and could be ended by a ripping bite at the unquilled throat. And so another week went by. Jim knew that the pups might very soon be leaving their home. He had reached by now and was minutely searching the little valleys that ran north from the Sulphur River. One of these contained the den. He had found only a few tracks hereabouts, for by this time the old wolf was fully aware of his designs and was leaving and approaching the valley by way of the rock slides and moss patches that could hold little sign. She moved only by night, and even then avoided the moonlit places as much as possible. There was only one thing she overlooked, and that was the danger that might come from the scenting powers of Jim's dog, the big black and white husky, himself part wolf. She took care only to hide her trail from the eye of man, as if that was all that mattered. Therefore, early one morning, when the treacherous dew was heavy on the rocks, the husky, wandering about with the old man, came upon her trail while the scent was still kept fresh by the moisture. It led with almost no dodging toward the glade below the den. At first Jim scarcely noticed the dog. Then, as the beast began to show excitement, he grew more interested. He found just one fresh track where the wolf's toes had slipped on a mossy stone. That was enough. Now he was even more eager than the dog. His chance had come. And the husky was doing his work well, breathing hard with the work and wagging his sickle-shaped tail. He was scenting out each paw mark and heading unerringly for the den. If he had barked or bayed like a hound, the she-wolf might have been warned in time to carry or lead the pups away. She was lying hidden among the rocks directly above the den, where the playing of the lusty youngsters would not annoy her while she slept. The scrape of an iron nail on rock brought her to her feet in an instant. She saw between the rocks the crouched form of Jim coming straight up the mountain. Like a shadow, she moved around the boulders until the pups were in view, lolling in front of the den, one of them as black as when he was born, two of them rusty black, and three reddish-brown. These three browns would be gray like their father when they grew up. Silent as she was, they heard her and looked expectantly in her direction, but instead of looking at them, she was watching the glade below, her hair bristling along her back, her footsteps stealthy. The pups' excitement withered as if frosted. They cowered down, too. It did not need her mixture of growl and snort to send them scurrying into their den. After they were out of sight, the black wolf moved forward among the boulders to leave a hot trail as a decoy for the dog, and then descended into a gully and began a quick, stealthy run toward the timber to the right of Jim. So well situated was the den for just an escape that neither the old man nor the dog caught a glimpse of her. No wonder, perhaps, for by this time the husky was close enough to scent the den in the breeze. He stopped trailing and advanced with nose held high. Not even the fresh tracks left by the old wolf could lead him away now. He nosed among the boulders and came suddenly upon the entrance. With a yelp of joy, he leaped forward and began to bark furiously at the dark cave's narrow mouth. Jim was only a few paces behind, but his heart was pounding as he could scarcely climb. Weeks of hard work were rewarded. He had won against all of the odds the wilderness could oppose to protect its favored ones. The stones and earth all about bore the footprints of the young wolves who had played there a great deal during the last few days. The place smelled of decaying meat and of the wolves themselves. The mother had not carried food there in her mouth like a fox, but usually had eaten at the place of the kill and then disgorged the daily rations for the growing pups. Jim could see from the tracks that the young ones were large enough to travel, and that he had been lucky indeed to find the den before they left it and took to the woods. He called away the husky and began rolling heavy boulders up to the entrance until it was completely choked. After testing the barricade, he started back to the cabin for a pack horse and digging tools. When he was well down the trail, the she-wolf rushed back to the den to lead the young ones away. She pulled and heaved against the barricade. She called to the young ones and they whimpered in reply, but it was all to no avail. Then slowly she limped back to the timber to await night. At the cabin, Jim found Johnny and told him the wonderful news. They loaded pick and shovel on one of the horses and hurried back. Jim also brought 2 steel traps. With a good will, they got to work at the den and made the dirt fly.